Russian diplomats are meeting with other delegates in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe today as efforts continue to de-escalate tensions over Ukraine. Talks between Russian and NATO officials ended on Wednesday without a breakthrough. EU foreign and defense ministers are also gathering today in the French city of Brest to discuss the crisis. Well, for nearly 8 years now, Ukrainian forces have been fighting a Russian-backed separatist insurgency in the east of the country. The conflict has claimed some 14,000 lives. With tens of thousands of Russian troops now massing on the border, many in Ukraine fear an imminent invasion. DW correspondent Nick Connolly traveled to the frontline city of Donetsk and sent us this report.
Just before the shooting starts, you see the cats and dogs taking cover. It's like they can feel it's coming.
Here on the front lines near Donetsk, gunfire and shelling are part of everyday life and have been for the past 8 years. For the stray animals, the Ukrainian soldiers and the few civilians left.
There's still people living there and over there. Beyond that, there's no one, just the front line.
Most of those left are elderly and have nowhere else to go. Russian-backed separatists are only a few hundred meters away from these Ukrainian positions, close enough to watch each other cooking or chopping firewood. We arrived just a matter of minutes after the last exchange of fire. The Ukrainians say both sniper activity and drone attacks have spiked in recent weeks. As the world tries to second-guess Vladimir Putin's troop build-up on Ukraine's borders, the soldiers here understand that they would likely be the first to bear the brunt of an invasion.
Of course, we're following the news closely, but whatever happens, our army is in much better shape than in 2014. Russia would face a lot more resistance. It's the civilians out there who are getting really nervous.
You see that power line? Our troops are 30 meters behind it. They managed to push their positions forward a bit.
When we first met Katya and her children in 2017, the fighting was even closer. Back then, the front line started where her garden ended. Today, she tells us, is a good day. No shelling, only machine gun fire.
I go on walks with the kids round the village and we hear machine gun fire in the distance. We just do our thing. We're not scared.
Katya's 3 children have grown up knowing nothing but conflict. Now, as all-out war seems ever more likely, she's weeks away from giving birth to a 4th. She knows most people couldn't imagine bringing up a family in a place like this.
For better or worse, this is my village. I know all the paths. I know where to hide if the bombing starts. I know what will protect me. If I can drop into a ditch in time, I'll survive.
But after sticking it out for years, even Katya is now making plans to leave. Back at the front lines, I asked Alexander if he thinks Russia will get its way and keep Ukraine out of Western alliances.
NATO membership is not going to happen anytime soon, but I think in the end they'll take us. A lot has changed in this country, and so have we. The Russians have done everything they could to convince us that they're not our brothers, to make us turn our backs on them.
And for now at least, Russia seems to be in no mood to try to win back Ukrainian hearts and minds.
As I mentioned earlier, EU foreign and defense ministers are meeting in the French city of Brest today to discuss the situation in Ukraine. Our Brussels correspondent, Marina Strauß, is there. Marina, what's the EU's role in trying to find a diplomatic solution to the crisis in Ukraine?
There's been quite some frustration among EU leaders recently because, to be honest, they have been left at the sidelines when it comes to this Ukraine-Russia process, because we've seen quite some high-level international meetings considering this, looking at this conflict this week, including Russia, of course, the US and NATO, but not the EU as an institution. Of course, many EU member states, 21 to be exact, are members also of NATO, and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg traveled to Brest yesterday to talk to defense ministers and brief them about the NATO-Russia Council, and he said, of course, the EU plays an important role because this is a conflict just in front of the door of the European Union. But of course, not being directly involved leaves kind of a bitter feeling here.
The EU wants Russian troops to pull back from Ukraine's border. The Kremlin wants guarantees that NATO will not expand eastwards. Do EU leaders see any room for compromise?
EU leaders have made it very clear that they won't back down on certain key pillars of European security structure. For example, the sovereignty of not only Ukraine but also other post-Soviet countries. They've also made it very clear that if Russia invades Ukraine, it will have severe consequences, further sanctions, etc. But the problem is that the EU does not necessarily speak with one voice in this conflict, because we have the Baltic states in Poland, for example. They have borders with Russia and they see the Russian threat. They also could imagine putting boots on the ground. This won't happen, certainly. Then we have France that has seen a sort of rapprochement with Russia lately. Then we have Germany that is heavily dependent on Russian gas, so they really don't speak with one voice. And another problem is that the EU is a strong economic player in the world, but not necessarily a strong military player. And that's actually something EU defense and foreign ministers will discuss here in Brest today, because that's something they want to change in the future.
Marina, thank you very much. That was DW correspondent Marina Strauß in Brest.